and at Scharikbergen, where my sister lived. Both of them were prevented from inviting her, so she stayed on in Paris. It rained, and the town was deserted. "I'm never depressed, as you know," she said to me, "but I was depressed then." Fortunately, a little while after I passed through, my sister had her to stay in Alsace for a fortnight. Now her friends were in Paris again. I was coming back, and but for that broken bone, I should certainly have found her in good form once more. Her heart was in excellent condition, and her blood pressure was that of a young woman. I had never been afraid of a sudden mishap for her. At about 6 o'clock, I telephoned her at the nursing home. I told her that I was on my way back and that I was coming to see her. She answered in a wavering, doubtful voice. Professor B took over the telephone. He was going to operate on Saturday morning. "You haven't written me a letter for 2 months, she said as I came towards her bed. I protested. We had seen each other. I had sent her a letter from Rome. She listened to me with an air of disbelief. Her forehead and hands were burning hot. Her mouth was slightly twisted. She had difficulty in articulating, and her mind was confused. Was this the effect of shock, or had her fall been caused by a slight stroke? She had always had a nervous tic. No, not always, but for a long while. Since when? She blinked. Her eyebrows went up, her forehead wrinkled. While I was there, this nervous movement never stopped for a second, and when her smooth, rounded eyelids came down, they completely covered her pupils. Dr. J, an assistant, looked in. There was no point in operating. The femur had not shifted, and with 3 months of rest, it would reknit. Maman seemed relieved. In a muddled way, she told me about her efforts to reach the telephone, her intense anxiety, the kindness of Bost and Olga. She had been taken to the hospital in her dressing gown, without any baggage at all. The next day, Olga had brought her toilet things, some eau de cologne and a pretty white wool bed jacket. When she said thank you, Olga had replied, "But I do it out of affection, madam." Several times, with an earnest, musing air, Maman repeated, "She said to me, 'I do it out of affection.'" She seemed so ashamed of being a nuisance, so immensely grateful for what was done for her. "It was enough to break your heart," Olga told me that evening. She spoke indignantly of Dr. D. He was annoyed at Dr. Lacroix's having been called in, and he had refused to go and see Maman at the hospital on Thursday. "I stood there, clutching the telephone for 20 minutes, said Olga. "After the shock, and after her night in the hospital, your mother needed comforting by her usual doctor. He wouldn't listen to a word of it." Bost did not think that Maman had had a stroke. When he had helped her up, she seemed a little bewildered, but quite clear in her mind. He doubted whether she would recover in 3 months, however. The breaking of the neck of the femur was not in itself a serious matter, but a long period of lying still caused bed sores, and with old people, they did not heal. The lying position was tiring for the lungs. Patients developed pneumonia, and it carried them off. I was not very much affected. In spite of her frailty, my mother was tough. And after all, she was of an age to die. Bost had told my sister, and I had a long talk with her on the telephone. "I knew it would happen," she said. In Alsace, she had thought Maman had aged so, and had grown so weak, that she had said to Lionel, "She will never get through the winter." One night, Maman had had violent abdominal pains. She had very nearly asked to be taken to hospital. But in the morning she was better, and when they took her home by car, "charmed, delighted with her stay," as she put it. She had recovered her strength and her cheerfulness. But halfway through October, about 10 days before her accident, Francine Diatto telephoned my sister. "I have just been having lunch with your mother. She seemed to me so poorly that I thought I ought to warn you." My sister invented an excuse for coming to Paris at once, and she took Maman to a radiologist. When he had looked at the plates, her doctor stated categorically, "There is nothing for you to worry about. A kind of pocket has formed in the intestine, a fecal pocket that makes the movement of the bowels difficult, and then your mother does..."